Okay. Here we go.
Okay. Now what?
This is episode 1 of I think I'm just gonna call it the Interesting Podcast.
Oh, that's pretty interesting.
I would hope it'd be interesting because it's in the name. I'm hoping to...
You're setting a high bar.
I am basically, after my ARG is done, I'm gonna hopefully once a month release a video that is a podcast to my YouTube channel.
Gotcha.
That is half an hour to an hour long. And it'll just be the audio with a picture of me and the person.
Alright.
And you're gonna be the first person.
Alright, well.
Congratulations.
I'm honored. This is a big day.
Yeah. Real big day.
So what's the topic of your podcast?
Well, the basic idea of it, the interesting podcast, is just I'd sit down with people that I knew who I know have do interesting things and have experienced interesting things, and just sit down with them and talk to them about the stuff. You've been a professor down at OU. And you've told me all sorts of crazy stories of weird things you've seen down in Athens. I feel like that's a great place to start. And you've done a lot of things down in Athens. You've been a professor, right?
Well, yeah, instructor. Right?
Instructor. You've worked for the news. I know you've taken pictures for some sort of newspaper down there, right?
Yeah, not really for the newspaper, but I've taken photographs for the university, for the College of Fine Arts and the university.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the word "interesting" is an interesting word because it sets up some expectations when you're having a conversation, and then when you're having a conversation that's being recorded, it sets up even different kinds of expectations.
Yeah. It'll get better as we go on.
Sure, maybe. I hope it does. Yeah,
there's got to be some interesting things that you've worked on down at OU.
Things. Yep. There's definitely things that I think are interesting, and I think living life is you run into interesting people, and you end up in interesting situations. Some of them are interesting in a good way, and some of them are interesting in a maybe more challenging way. Yeah.
We're gonna say interesting a lot during this.
I know. Then I think at the end, when you're in post-production, you need to bleep out every time you say the word interesting, beep it, so that it sounds like we're saying something
just
very
cursing.
different. That's right. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know what kinds of interesting things. Sometimes having a conversation around what's interesting is hard.
Yeah. I know for some time I was talking to you, and you said you were sort of organizing for people.
Uh-huh.
You would have to help people get together and coordinate projects over email. And you said it was difficult sometimes because it'd be a lot easier if these people just communicated with each other.
That's true.
And they didn't have to go through you. It's got to be a little interesting.
Goose. Sorry, I saw a goose.
No, you're good. We're in the car.
I think communication, team communication, can be really tricky. Before you're in the world of coordinating conversations and projects through email to multiple people who may or may not talk outside of those conversations, it feels like a project can be as simple as telling people what to do, and then they do it, and then you check to make sure they've done it, and you're good. But in reality, project management can be really messy.
Yeah.
And in the higher education environment, in college education environment, and I'm only going to speak from my own experience, but in that environment, in the arts, in the art world, in higher education, there's a lot of egos. People have, a lot of faculty members, the instructors, as well as the administrators, the people who work behind the scenes.
Right.
A lot of people have egos, big egos. They have strong opinions. They can be highly critical.
Borderline my way or the highway approach to some things.
In some things, yes. In some things. And also the landscape of a project crosses over different territories. So it might be a project that's about telling the story of a faculty member's research project. Okay, so from my perspective, that's my goal, is to tell the story to the bigger world.
Right.
But from the faculty member's perspective, it's not just about telling the story, it's also about mentioning all the right people. And it's also about getting the story to the right audience that's going to help that faculty member out in the future. And so there's different kinds of goals and outcomes that are hoped for by different people.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, most of the time, individuals' projects touch on many different people. There are different people involved in the projects. There's different resources that go into it, and the people who are responsible for those resources are part of the story. And so it ends up becoming a kind of messy project to make sure that you're telling the story truthfully and the facts are accurate.
Right.
But also that it's an interesting and compelling story that doesn't get bogged down in the weeds of all the different details. And so that in that way, sometimes things can get messy. And that's just one story, right? And so there are times when there's more complex projects.
Yeah. And all these things overlap sometimes.
And there's a lot of overlap. And, the deadline to get Part A done, you can't start Part B until Part A is done. And then sometimes Part C has to start before any of it so that you can, line it up so it's done at the right time. And, dealing with people's egos is an interesting thing. And even at 45 plus years old, I still feel like I'm learning every day how to approach different, working with different people. It always feels like I'm learning it for the first time in many instances. By the time I'm 45, I should know how to not insult somebody, but be able to give critical feedback. But sometimes it's hard to do that. Sometimes it's hard to say, you're wrong about this thing, because it feels like you have to step on eggshells and not be critical. Or when you are critical, be careful not to write the criticism down in an email, because then it's part of the official record, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of what I'm learning as an older adult in the career field, in a career of any kind, is there's a good time to put it in an email and have it on, basically in the record, and there's a good time to call somebody on the phone and just have a conversation. Because if you call them on the phone and have a conversation, it's not in the record, it's not recorded anywhere. And so you could say some things that you really don't want to put on paper. Because you don't want to get, you don't want that stuff to come back and haunt you in the future if you're being critical of somebody. But I think that's probably one of the interesting things about, that kind of project coordination.
Yeah. I feel like people have gotten a lot more careful for the better over the years. I feel like careful is sometimes not the best word to use. Mm-hmm. Considerate, but sometimes it's a real pain to be considerate.
Yeah.
And it's tough and it's hard.
Sometimes it is difficult to be considerate or to be forgiving or gracious. Those things can be really hard. Patient with people. I think I lose my patience with people make you angry.
Yeah.
even if ultimately they're not trying to make you angry, it's almost like that person grates on me. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness, what is going on up here?
There's somebody.
Well, this is interesting, Elliot.
It's a white van ran off the
my
road.
God.
Ambulance, fire truck, and another thing, and another car ran off the road.
See, I think that every episode of your podcast needs to happen on the road. You need to have conversations while driving.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we can have our conversation here, but then the world's rushing by at 70 miles an hour, and interesting things can come about.
Look at that. We've come full circle.
What are you, so when you think about being patient with people and how that can be hard, like, what have you experienced in your life that makes you, like, that resonates with, you know, that you
sometimes I'm over at college. When I was working in college, you'd get put in a group project and all that. Sometimes, oh my God, my brain is dying.
It's hard to be on the spot.
It kind of is. I feel bad now. Bringing my phone out and recording you all of a sudden.
The podcast that happens without warning.
Oh my God, ask the question again. I'm dying.
When
I'm already...
like, we've all felt this way in our lives, and it usually starts pretty early on when you're, like, in elementary school and junior high and high school. You have to deal with people.
Oh, yeah.
That test your patience, you know, that, like, you know you need to be patient in the situation, but it's hard.
Yeah. It's basically customer service.
Yep.
Most of the time, people are great.
Yep.
I don't want to discredit great people that great customers that come through where I work.
Yep.
But sometimes there are people who come through, or people that I work with. Some days I go into work, and there's that guy there who's up my butt about every single little thing.
Yep.
And I'm doing it wrong because it's his way or the highway.
Yep.
And if he sees me not doing things the way he does it, it is clearly wrong.
Yep.
And then dealing with customers, most of the time it's not that bad. I was about to go off on be like, you're bagging groceries and they've got some specific way they want things bagged. That's not really a big issue once you get it down pat. You're able to do things. There's a lady who comes through our store. She absolutely hates the way that everybody bags in the store, so she bags everything herself. But how she wants us to bag it herself, is she wants us to put all of her groceries into a paper bag, put that paper bag into another paper bag, and then put those two paper bags into a plastic bag.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there going, why would you just shoo me away and bag it yourself at a certain point? I sometimes I feel bad for thinking that, but other times I'm like, I'm really tired. I do not want to do this sometimes. Sometimes bagging groceries isn't really considered a collaborative medium.
It's hard to be collaborative.
Sometimes you have to. The communication is kind of important with how things are supposed to be bagged. Some people just want things bagged differently than how.
That's right. The standard procedure.
Yeah. Sometimes
I have a question for you about bagging.
Oh yeah.
This is like a constant complaint that I have about baggers, and it has everything to do with like those baggers who put 3 things in a plastic, 3 tiny little things in a bag, and then they give you the bag. And they put one big thing in a bag, and they give you a bag. And so you end up with like 75 Kroger grocery bags.
Yeah, I try to do my best to keep it consistent. They tell us to keep it consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Most people do not, and I don't know why.
Oh man, it drives me nuts.
It drives me nuts too. I'll go grocery shopping with Mom, and I'll shoo the courtesy clerk away, and I'll bag, even though I'm not on the clock. I'm like, you don't get to bag my groceries.
Yeah. It's funny.
Whenever I go on break, I get one of those little $1 Michelin meals and a soda. Don't you dare bag this. Don't.
I don't need a bag for this.
I'm about to go into the break room and just eat this. I don't need a bag. It's the break room. All those back rooms in grocery stores.
Those back rooms are interesting.
Those back rooms.
Interesting things that happen there.
We'll get to those YouTube videos here in a moment. But I always thought it was funny. People come up to me, can you check in the back for something?
Yeah.
You check in the back. First off, I bag groceries. I don't know I can't tell you what's in the back.
Yeah.
Because you want to know why? I don't go in the back. The only reason why I go in the bag is to take my break and take out the trash.
Yep.
I do not stock things.
Yep.
I used to work the meat department, so I probably tell you where things were in the meat department, but other than that, I can't go into the frozen cooler and find your frozen meals or your frozen vegetables that aren't stocked right now. You're just gonna have to wait. I always find it funny, people who everybody tells the stories of like having some customer, they fight with the customer. It's not in the back. You go check in the back. It's not in the back. You go check in the back.
Yep.
All right, I go check in the back. And they just go back there and they get a drink of water. They stand back there for like a couple seconds, come back out.
Oh, yeah.
Wasn't
Hang out
out
for
there.
a while.
Yeah.
Yep.
You just sent that employee on a 5-minute break.
It's good. Ask me what's in the back.
Yeah.
I mean, if you need a break, you can just say, did you find everything you needed? Are you sure? Because I can go check the back if you want.
Yeah. The mystical back. Some back rooms. You
Definitely
want
a liminal space.
a liminal space, yeah. For those of you who are listening to this podcast and don't know about the back rooms, either as the creepypasta, the video game, or most importantly, this YouTube video series, which is pretty interesting. It is basically this endless randomly generated or randomly placed set of rooms that look like a liminal space that people just get stuck in. And I showed you a few videos. They're pretty interesting, right? And
yeah, they're very interesting.
to have that all generated by Kane Pixels with VFX effects.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's definitely like I've always thought about office spaces being these in-between spaces that aren't like, they don't feel like real spaces. They're actually meant, I think they're like architecturally meant to be this weird kind of neutral zone that's apolitical and it's not emotional, and it's supposed to be like a blank canvas, right?
Right.
And then you go there and you get your work done, and then you leave. And it's not supposed to be like the home or the house where it's like personal.
Right.
But it's also like an office space is not supposed to be like the public social space, like a public forum or a middle of town square or something. It's not supposed to be like that. But this video series is interesting because it taps into all of that feeling of like, if you imagine removing all the furniture from the office space and all you're left with is like the walls, the flickering fluorescent lights, and the carpet, and a few little pieces of furniture here and there, but really nothing functional. And then it's just like endless hallways and endless rooms that are empty, and then occasionally some weird sounds come from deep inside.
Yeah.
And then other things come out too, but...
Yeah. I saw somebody did a video on the back rooms. They said it is an ode to the woes of being forgotten.
Oh, yeah.
The fear of being forgotten, of being left out.
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of stuck in the back rooms, which being forgotten could kind of feel like this. You're sort of wandering about in this liminal empty space.
Yep.
And, you're just you don't recognize anything. Yep. Nobody's coming to find you because they can't find you. You're just forgotten.
But speaking from my own experience and from a general cultural, phenomenon, that is the way that it sometimes can feel to work in an office space in a big company. You can feel like the reference of being a cog in the machine is actually a reference that goes back to the industrial age when, like manual labor, you could literally feel like you're just a piece of a giant machine. But when you're in an office space in a corporate environment, you don't really feel like you're a part of a machine as much as you feel like you're just sitting there in no man's land. Like
you're taking up space.
You're just taking up a little space and nobody sees you and you're really a nothing, and it can feel like that for sure. I mean, I spent, I don't know, probably 10 years on and off working with different companies that oftentimes were these giant corporate companies, and it did feel that way. It did feel like I was just doing busy work, and I wasn't contributing meaningfully to anything. And I literally felt like I could go into the office, work all day, and leave, and never speak to anybody. And, even though there were workers all around me doing the same thing.
Yeah. You're in some ways alienated.
Oh yeah, it
from your
definitely
work.
feels alienated. That's part of why I decided I had to go back to school and retool what I was doing with my life, because
you had some interesting things happen to you while you were in school down in Athens.
Yep.
There was one thing in particular. There's a lot of creepy things down in Athens.
Creepy things.
You worked in that old insane asylum, the Bridges.
Yep, I did.
And we've been to some of the more dubious parts of it that you can no longer go into now.
That's true. That's true. Those are definitely liminal spaces with a lot of peeling paint and stains from dead bodies, I think. But no, that was weird. That was like an amazing building to be in, with a lot of history.
Yeah.
A lot of history.
But you've seen there are some other things down in Athens, one of which you have seen. The thing you haven't seen, everybody talks about how there's like baby Loch Ness Monster.
Oh yeah.
In the river that runs through Athens. But you did see something walking home from work one night. You wanna tell that little story?
I don't know. You mean the giant?
Yeah, the giant.
Oh yeah. When I think sometimes when I think these stories are really important because they're like your own personal mythology.
Right.
And it's valuable to have these personal myths. Did I really see a giant? I don't know. The answer is no. I didn't really see it. But did I? Because I don't believe in giants per se.
Yeah.
Do I believe in large people? Yeah, I believe in large people. I know they exist.
Probably
I know that very tall men exist in the world.
Some large student, some very tall student, walking home one night.
Is it possible that there were two students, one on top of the other's shoulders, wearing a very long overcoat and a hat? Maybe.
Muppet Man.
It's not out of the question. But the story that I remember, as I remember it, was heading home. Actually, it wasn't heading home. We were driving on the road behind the insane asylum, and there is like a halfway house that's like for folks who have diminished mental capacity and need additional support, and they can live in this halfway house kind of environment. And it's just like a big multi-story house that has multiple apartments and people can live in there. But the story is that we were driving by that place. It's kind of out, surrounded by woods and forests, so it's kind of like a quiet space to drive by. And there was a person, very tall person, standing in the backyard of this place, and I could see them from the road. And they just sort of like were walking, and I thought the scale is all wrong because they're so far away from me. They should be much smaller, but they were very tall. And in my memory, they sort of like saw the car drive by and sort of like gestured but not waved, just kind of like, and then went behind the building. And then I've never seen them ever since. I drove by that building a lot and never saw them again. But there was that one time when I swear I saw a giant.
The creepy giants skulking.
Skulking, or maybe they're shy. Maybe it was a shy giant.
Shy giant.
Yep.
The BSG. The big shy giant.
Big shy giant. Yeah. Maybe. I mean, I don't know. Again, this is like, I've always been fascinated with this because I think that this is how people generate these myths like Bigfoot. Do I believe in Bigfoot? I don't know. Not really. Mm-hmm. But can I imagine that there would be like a shared psychosis in an area if one person says they saw Bigfoot and they swear they saw Bigfoot, and then somebody else in their community heard that they had seen it and they believe the person and they trust them, and then they're out in the woods and it's late at night, or they're driving and it's like driving home at dawn and they're tired and they see something move in the woods and they swear they saw Bigfoot. I think that's how those myths start up. Because you just like, you know, we have a scientific understanding that our brain, like, we only can understand a very small percentage of what our eyes see.
Yeah.
You know, like we only understand a little bit of the detail, and then we just kind of like fill in the rest with our imagination.
Right.
And I think that's how it works.
There's a sort of filter.
Yep. And I think some people are more open to the imaginary than others. Like, they want there to be Bigfoot more than anything.
Right. There's some documentary I saw years ago. It's an Irish documentary about a guy who he's looking for fairies.
Okay.
And one of the things he did is he went to a third grade classroom and talked to all the kids there. And he asked them how to see fairies. And they were all like, you just gotta see them. You just gotta see them. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it's an interesting thing. When you're a kid, you sort of, it's always like you see scary things in the dark.
Yep.
And as you grow up, sort of those things sort of grow away, and we all sort of write it off as you're just becoming more mature. You are grasping a bigger understanding of the world around you. But I know there's also an idea out there where, as you're a kid, you can just see more.
Yeah.
Some people think that as you're a kid, your brain doesn't filter out all this extra stuff that you're able to see.
Yep.
And as a kid, you just find all this extra stuff incredibly scary. And as an adult, you can't really see those things anymore.
Yeah,
I think it's super interesting.
That is interesting. I mean, I think we see, as adults, we like recognize the stuff we can't understand as noise, and so we just like brush it off. Like, we know there's an explanation, we think there's an explanation, so we just understand that we just don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Like, why you can't see, you know, what's back behind the dark that you can't see. Well, we know that it makes us nervous, but we also trust that there's not a monster back there, because that's not rational.
Yeah.
I've never really been a big fan of like horror movies and scary movies. I mean, as a high school kid, junior high actually, I watched a lot of horror movies.
Yeah.
I really liked The
Thing.
Yeah, like I really liked to watch them when I was younger. As I got older, they're not as scary to me. They're not like the they make me nervous and my palms sweat? Yes, they do, but they're not really scary like the real scary thing, which to me, the human capacity for violence and for depravity is scarier than.
Oh yeah. Well, it's mortifying.
And it's not even like like those horror movies that are about humans that do bad things to other humans. I mean, yeah, it's terrible to think about, like, graphic violence one human to another, but I don't know.
It's another thing to be living through it.
It's another thing to be living through it, but also the value of being scared to me is like the world is already scary enough. Like,
yeah.
there's already enough terrible things in the real world that aren't classified as a horror movie that I don't need to watch the horror movie.
Yeah.
Just turn on the news, and just soak it in.
That's what the people on the news need to start doing. Is they need to start wearing like spooky masks.
Yeah.
When they're giving the news.
There you go.
We'll get across how absolutely terrifying this is.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure people understand. All this construction. Look at all this.
It's a mess.
All this stimulus money at work. Look at all that. It's a mess, but
progress.
But listen, these people are working now, and they started last summer, and they probably wouldn't have been working last summer.
That's true.
If these public works projects hadn't been started, they would have been.
That's true.
In a lesser spot.
A lot of value in public works money.
Yeah.
So, this is the interesting podcast.
The interesting podcast. This has been interesting, right?
It has been interesting. You really like step up your conversation game when you're on tape.
Yeah,
like,
you kind of do.
You have to okay, I got to bring it. I got to bring something to the conversation.
You're being seen. This is the concept
right.
of being seen, and sometimes you don't always know who you're going to be seen by.
Oh my God, that's scary.
Yeah.
I have to intentionally leave out names when I talk about people.
Yeah. There's... who's
I get off at Hudson to get to your house?
Yes. Thank you for doxing me on the internet. It's okay. It's not the street I live on. It doesn't matter.
You can just bleep that part out.
I'll try. I've suddenly lost my train of thought.
Oh man.
It's Homer Simpson on the highway.
Saw that. You just doxed yourself.
There are plenty of Homer Simpsons on so many different highways.
On 71 North,
bet.
headed towards Hudson Avenue in Columbus, Ohio.
No! No! Come on! No!
It means you have to cut the podcast off early.
No, you haven't said my actual address.
What is it again?
No. No, please don't. I'm gonna start getting hate mail from my 38 YouTube subscribers.
That's funny.
Yeah, it's been real interesting having a YouTube channel.
Okay.
Because for the longest time, I sort of thought of it as like a place to just keep memories.
Yep.
The first YouTube video I put up, it was that, my trip down to Boonville. And then it was like my marching band. And then like other random things that would happen. And then I was uploading a YouTube video like once a month. And I was kind of keeping up with that. And then I sort of stopped for a little bit.
Yep.
And I went, I'm going to upload a YouTube video once a week. I moved out to this side of town. So, pardon me. I'm going to start doing more with my YouTube channel. And it started growing. And now I feel sometimes I really enjoy running the YouTube channel. And other times it's added stress that I don't need. I sit there and I go, I need to get a YouTube video out every single Saturday. I need to get a YouTube video out every single Saturday. It's 10 p.m. on a Saturday. I haven't gotten my YouTube video out. What am I going to do to my YouTube video today?
That's right.
And most of the times I come up with something that's not that good.
Yeah.
That I stick out on YouTube, and I feel kind of bad about it. None of the times I work hard on it and I get it out in time.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I don't get something out at all.
Yep.
And I feel bad about those times. And being an artist is hard. Doing that sort of thing is hard.
I think there's a level of commitment to it that I admire. The fact that you've been committed to doing it, and even if it means being on the fly, making up something at the last minute, it shows a level of commitment to this project that I think is commendable. And I also think that it's interesting to watch how you. I don't mean to left here, but
the alley.
I think it's interesting to watch how your content, like developing your video content, has changed.
Yeah.
Right here?
Yeah. Used to just be me with a Canon camera that was pink.
Uh-huh. Yeah, but just like before, you weren't really telling stories visually. You weren't you were just talking to the camera.
It was just me talking to the camera going, look at this giant puddle in my backyard.
But, you've kind of come up with interesting new ways to express ideas, so it's good. All right,
This has been interesting podcast number 1.
Yep, thanks for having me on.
Yeah,
next
anytime.
Time, give me a little heads up, and
I'm
be
sorry.
better prepared with some interesting stories.
You'll come back for
bring
another
me back
episode.
Bring me back for the 10th anniversary.
Yeah, the 10th episode. I'll bring you back.
You do it once a year, right?
I'm gonna try to do it once a month.
Okay. I can wait that long. 10 months.
In February of next year. Yay.